November 16th. To get ready for this lesson, I want you to open the article Wild Boy of the Road. If you go to classwork, it's in that top section. You also need to have Out of the Dust handy. Be ready with Wild Boy of the Road, the poem. It's on page 58 in the book, hard copy, and page 54 on the PDF. And also underneath module 1, so at the bottom section, I want you to open up the document Wild Boy of the Road. So you can pause this till you have those ready. Our focusing question for this lesson, which we'll be looking at today and tomorrow, is what sustained people's spirits during the Great Depression? That's the same focusing question that we've been looking at for several days. The content framing question, how did the module text build my knowledge about how people persevered during the Great Depression? So how do all the different texts that we've looked at, how does that build your knowledge about how people didn't give up, how they kept going during the Great Depression? And the craft question is, how do I use a 2-seek mini essay to respond to the focusing question task? So what text, photographs, and videos have we read so far that have taught you about the Great Depression? We have looked at the novel Bud Not Buddy, the novel Out of the Dust. We read an article about Hoovervilles. Today we're going to read the article Hoover's Prodigal Children. We looked at the photo Kentucky Flood. We watched the video about the GM sit-down strike, and we watched the video Black Blizzards. So all of those texts have taught us a lot about how people persevered and how people had to live during the Great Depression. So based on your viewing of these materials and reading these texts, what have we learned about the Great Depression and the people who lived during this era? I want you to take a second. I want you just to think about it. There are two new vocabulary words for this lesson, sympathy and compassion. And they're used in the article when it describes that we're going to be reading today for homework. It describes people's interactions with strangers. And what does it mean to be sympathetic and compassionate? For one thing, sympathy is the feeling and showing of concern for someone in physical or mental pain. Like when you feel sorry for someone, that's showing sympathy. Compassion is taking it one step further by not only feeling sorry or bad for someone, but actually doing something to help them. So in the article, I want you to think about this question as you read the article. What was the result of people's feelings? What was the result of people feeling sympathetic and compassionate for the migrants' downtrodden situation? So the migrants who were trying to move, find work, find food, how did people, when they felt sympathetic and compassionate, what did they do about it? And you'll find that they didn't ignore their desperation. People who had a little extra would give migrants money, food, and other handouts to help them make it through tough times. So your assignment for today is to read an article, and I want to read the poem to you, Wild Boy of the Road. It's on page 58. So follow along with me while I read it. It says, a boy came by the house today. He asked for food. He couldn't pay anything, but Ma sat him down and gave him biscuits and milk. He offered to work for his meal. Ma sent him out to see Daddy. The boy and Daddy came back late in the afternoon. The boy walked 2 steps behind, in Daddy's dust. He wasn't more than 16, thin as a fence rail. I wondered what Livy Killian's brother looked like now. I wondered about Livy herself. Daddy asked if the boy wanted a bath, a haircut, change of clothes before he moved on. The boy nodded. I never heard him say more than yes, sir, or no, sir, or much obliged. We watched him walk away down the road in a pair of Daddy's mended overalls, his legs like willow limbs, his arms like reeds. Ma rested her hands on her heavy stomach. Dad rested his chin on the top of my head. His mother's worrying about him, Ma said. His mother's wishing her boy would come home. Lots of mothers wishing that these days while their sons walk to California where rain comes and the color green doesn't seem like such a miracle, and hope rises daily like sap in a stem. And I think, someday I'm going to walk there too, through New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada. Someday I'll leave behind the wind and the dust and walk my way west and make myself to home in that distant place of green vines and promise. July 1934. So based on that poem, you're going to compare and contrast that to the article. To go to the article, I want you to scroll. Let me take to the top. You're going to scroll down. You can read this part, but you don't have to for this assignment. But it is pretty interesting, and the pictures are really neat. But you're going to scroll all the way down. Now that picture should look familiar. To where Hoover's Prodigal Children, Hungry Times on Mean Streets. This is the section that I want you to read. You're going to read this section, When Did You Boys Last Eat? Put Your Pride in Your Pocket, The Buzzsaw of Life, Good Places for a Handout. and In the Hobo Jungle. So that section, it's a lot of reading, but it's very interesting based on what we've been reading. It should all, some of that should sound familiar to you. But you're going to read that, and you're going to come to your document, Wild Boy of the Road. And what you're going to do is you're going to compare and contrast the two. So here's the link to the article if you need it. And it tells you what sections to read. There's those five subsections. And here's the poem. You're going to be comparing and contrasting the two. So in the first column here, you're going to give me 3 things. You're going to copy and paste if you want to. 3 things that you've learned from the article that you didn't see in the poem. It's just strictly you read about it in the article. And then in the middle column, you're going to give me 3 things that you see happening in the article and in the poem. And then in the third column, you're going to list 3 things that happen in the poem. You can copy and paste, it's okay, but you don't see those things happening in the article. So you're comparing and contrasting the article to the poem Wild Boy of the Road. You're not looking at any other poems, just that one poem, Wild Boy of the Road. So if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Miss Maddox or to myself through Remind or email, and we will help you. But that is today's lesson. This is due at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.